Welcome to Teatro Absurdo with Huilo Marvavilla, brought to you by Jaguar Bridge Productions and The Great Mystery. Well, hello there, podcasters. Welcome to Teatro Absurdo. I'm Willow Marvavilla, and this is Series 3. Welcome aboard to that which is ludicrous, preposterous, crazy, and, if you're lucky, dazzling. Hello and welcome back to Teatro Absurdo and the continuation of this series, probing, investigating, looking at the mystery, the destruction, and the renewal, regeneration of the Jaguar Portals. So this episode, we're going to move away a little bit from actually looking at a specific painting to ponder over its symbolism. And I wanted to go a little bit more into what could be possibly behind destroying these paintings, because it could just be circumstance, weird, aggressive, that there were at least 4 specific events that people consciously destroyed artworks that represented my bold attempt to use patterns and colors and shape and story to invite the viewer into transcending the embattling of conflictual duality consciousness and perhaps moving towards, or at least being in an energy of discovery of unity consciousness, which is we are all one, we are all together, everything is us. And on so. So in the destruction of the art, there was a very specific bellwether tone where the first series of paintings, these were the illustrations had been created in Mexico for the first book, Flight of the Jaguar Magician, in Tales of a Jaguar Magician, available on Cramazon.com, Amazon.com. Search Tales of a Jaguar Magician. And also that the first 2 series of portal paintings were completed, so much so that I was getting ready to do an exhibit in New York, in Chelsea, in around 2007. Excuse the background noise. People are trying to sell things here in Mexico, and I don't know what they're selling, but it'll go away. So anyway, live in a podcast. This is not done in some fancy studio in LA with thousands of dollars of equipment. My intention is not to become a brand. My intention is to put this story out in different parts to enable production of the film Cries of a Jaguar over the next few years. And you too can help be a part of that. You can attend the art show where you can see the amazing regeneration of the new 30 paintings, Jaguar Portals, and their subsequential, am I saying that right, intended art weaving together story in a way for the viewer to consider a different perception, a different reality base, etc. The information is at the end of this podcast or in other podcasts, or you can go to my website, which is also at the end of the podcast. So anyway, I want to move on quickly for those that have low attention spans. I was staying on a horse with no name. Copyright. I was staying in the desert at what for now I'll call an artist community, a queer artist community, I'll add that, and with some very magical intentions. And I had just arrived at this place from, I believe, from Italia, where I had, I think I had been sculpting at that point and had done these beautiful goddess sculptures and abstract sculptures. But I had arrived back, was geared to stay at my friend's in the New Mexican desert. And so there's that. But let me preface a little bit about what you're about to hear, because this is a very special version of the podcast. I'm going to insert excerpts from a conversation I had with my lovely friend, Red Wolf Dancing Bear, who's an amazing magician, psychic, and tarot reader. You can follow them on Instagram. Please do a reading with them. They are fantastic to give you amazing guidance, as well as they do sound healing and all sorts of other things. I will do my best to post links for them at the end of this podcast. But so there are excerpts of, I wanted to move out of the me, and let you understand, or help you to understand or consider that there are other people that have witnessed these situations, these sort of supernatural, paranormal situations that maliciously destroyed these artworks. But that said, that'll come right after my spiel here, is I wanted to just kind of dive into my approach, my personal approach. I'm like, okay, what is doing this? What could be doing this aside from the circumstantial events? And there's things that I looked into. Like, one of the things are vulnerabilities and entities, and certainly there is the Carlos Castaneda approach and the inorganic beings. If you're not familiar with those, please do look up his books. Specifically, the Dream Awakening was one that I think sort of is how I look at some of the energy fields that may be feeding on the intention of these paintings. Okay, so this is getting mumbo-jumbo-ish, but what I want to get at is there are many beliefs around, certainly in the religious, there's possession of a human being. These have been documented for hundreds and thousands of years by humans, intentionally or unintentionally. And then move it fast forward into the weird exorcisms that go on in Christian religion to this day, which that will be another episode in the destruction of these paintings. But and then so there's something that, for lack of complete description, something that attaches to an energy field, kind of like a lover that won't go away, or a stalker, or a thought, or an obsession, or an addiction, or anything, a longing that just won't go away, a thought, a feeling. So there's that, and then there's the energy fields of deja vu, right? Of, I thought I heard something, I thought I saw something in the corner. As we're children, the monsters under the bed, in the closet, these sorts of things. And then you have Hollywood, who perverts these stories, or perhaps enlivens these stories in the collective consciousness. That will be another episode where I will talk about how I literally met an entity on stage in Hollywood at one of my shows. But onward, I want you to listen a little bit to Red Wolf's account of this night in March 2007. And it was the afterglow of a total eclipse of the moon. It was a dark and stormy night. I had arrived, like I said, from Italy, and this art center had a studio building that was separate from the lodging and the kitchen and these things. And I remember I had placed all the paintings. They were about 3 feet by 3 feet. They're next to a wall, lined them up, because the next day I was going to take them off the stretchers, roll them up, put them in my truck, and drive to Mexico, put the final touches on them, and then go to New York and do a show. So what you're about to hear is a testimony from my friend on his take of different events. Mine are a little bit different because the energy was aimed at me directly. But what's interesting is in my perceptual field, I believe we were warned 3 times, and 3 times the universe tried to stop us from going out, recognizing that there was a very sinister energy spiraling, leaching out of the energy on this land. So there you have it. Now listen and I'll come back.
Yeah, I had first class of a tarot group that I was leading about 7 miles away from where we lived at Zuni Mountain Sanctuary, and we had to go over a very rough, icy, trench-making road. As soon as you hit it, you dug in a foot and swerved and sank and swam all over the road, and the car went whoosh, and came to a direct stop in the ditch. Turned on the side, I believe. I could see the moon on the horizon. It was blood red, and it cast a very eerie glow on the whole essence of the night. We all just kept remarking how chilling we felt it. So we drove this scary, slippery, slidey road home. The car behind us, who had Willow and Feather in it, lost something off the top of their truck. So they turned around and were probably an hour behind us. But we got home to ZMS, there were 5 of us, and we all got out of the vehicle, and there was a chant happening. And it was a chant by this man who I'd heard chant before. He was a white man who was raised by Navajos, and he did Navajo song, storytelling and chanting, and he had a drum, and I knew his voice. But that night, his voice was deeper, scarier. The chant was strong and echoing across the land. Under the blood-red moon, we all looked at each other and were very creeped out by it. It's like we'd not heard something so kind of eerie and almost sinister to it. And we all decided we're not going to go up and have something to eat. We all just decided we wanted to go home to bed. Well, I believe I got up at 5:30 in the morning to go make coffee, went to the common house, came out, and I saw this pile of what looked like strange trash of picture frames and some other canvas in front of the studio, and I thought, well, that's odd, and I continued back to my residence in Juniper House, and I got into bed with Feather, and I said, something weird is happening, Feather. I don't know what that pile of stuff is in front of Juniper. And we laid there for a minute, just about ready to go up and coffee, and we hear a knock on our door, and this man comes in, and he says to Feather, oh, Feather, I've got to talk to you. I did something bad. You have to come with me. So we went with this man, and we went into the studio, and he opened the door to both of our horrors to see this giant stack of trashed artwork. Broken canvases, broken frames, all piled into this huge pile, almost like he smashed them and sat on it and picked it up and threw it in the air and smashed it and sat on it one more time. And he's like, something came into me, and I couldn't stand that artwork. I had to get rid of it. It was of the devil. I had to get rid of
So there you have a testimony of another person. It was definitely a spooky, creepy incident for a community. It had waves of what the hell just happened, and some acknowledgement that a certain person on this land was acting very different. We'll say that. So I think, what is interesting that I want to note is the land that was whispered of in this tale. I don't want to mention a lot because it has the name of indigenous people on it, and that can lead to all sorts of conundrums with people finger wagging at me at appropriation, or an argument about, who's occupying that land at the present. This is beyond that. But what I do want to get is it has been mentioned to me, the land where these paintings were destroyed, where this person got possessed, was known as a crossroads for indigenous warriors and tribes. I mean, imagine before GPS, they had certain mountains that they would look at and recall. But if it was a place where warriors crossed, that means that there were spirits, there were minds that were wrestling with whatever it takes for one human to kill another human on some counts. I mean, it's not suggesting right or wrong, but there's something in that. Perhaps people had died there and they're unsettled spirits. But what is energized there is there have been travelers crossing that land for thousands, hundreds of years. And interestingly enough, the indigenous peoples that have been living on those lands for many, many, many years do have in their creation myths that they came from the stars. So kind of interesting, relevant to what possessed this person to do this. So I think one of the things that occurs that I want to look at in the destruction of these paintings is that what I could see in the people or the presence where these paintings were at the time of destruction is that there were people who were very vulnerable and thus had made themselves available, knowing or unknowingly, willing to have attachments by other beings from other realms. So whatever you want to get into to describe that, I've talked about entities and different things before. So what happened is my encounter with this person, this man, was I had heard and kind of got a gist of it that there was the first sign of vulnerability for me was there was alcohol and pharmaceuticals involved. With someone that was, I don't always have the PC words, and I honor PC. I don't want to be like, what's his name on television? But, people have imbalances in their chemistry of their bodies, and they respond differently to emotions and coping and all these things. But one of the diagnoses of this person, or potential diagnosis, was manic depression. And manic depression is very real and can certainly be treated, with all kinds of things. But what it does, because I had noticed from this man, I had never known him or met him before, but I had sensed my brief encounter that morning on the land was that there was an emotional loneliness in this person. Sort of an abandonment on the couch, a sense of destitution, and an energy of antagonism. I remember hearing him say, because I think there was some argument about getting food and money on the land. He was like, I'd rather feed the birds than the humans, and I was like, oh, that's kind of harsh, and yet I also get it. And interesting. But I sensed there was something going on. And I also sensed that this person had been sort of in a lockdown in the snow. The community had been unable to get off the land because cars were stuck in the snow. So there began to be a sort of projection at me with someone who is imbalanced. So then you have vulnerability. But let me move beyond that, because I don't want to get into the psychology. I want to go more into the mystery. I have a very good friend that was also manic depressed. And I asked him, and I told him about this story. He says, he says, I kind of get it. He said, because at times before he was under treatment and he would get a spell of very severe manic depression, he said it was as if something got inside of him. And he was provoked into a mission to do something. And if that something was to destroy something, like he said one time, that mission was to knock out all the windows in his house, and thus he did. But it's when the person loses their majesty or control or coping or sensibility about themselves. It's like and one gives it up, or it's taken over. I think in this case it's taken over. And I think, to expand on that, it always occurred to me, it's like, what would provoke someone to destroy beauty? That they couldn't handle beauty, or it was freaking them out, or if they had any sort of distorted religious motif about images of demonic presence or hell or whatever goes on. I mean, my God, if a manic depressed person got into a museum and got into a state, they would destroy Dante's Inferno in 2 seconds, or Goya's paintings. This isn't something that humans haven't seen and witnessed and isn't celebrated, paintings like mine. But I had a conversation with this culprit, this person that destroyed the art of mine. A few weeks after, we talked on the phone very briefly. He expressed his remorse. He said, I've never done anything like this before. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. But it was just more like, after I talked to him and I thought about it, I felt when I was on the land and that morning and subsequently after that there was an energy that got into him that wanted to kill me. And what I had heard that may be erased or fabricated in my own mind was that night, it was reported to me that he was shouting, I want to off Willow, I want to off Willow. He was subsequently the next day or that night, I don't know what happened, hauled off the land. But whatever happened, it's certainly that a person was overcome with something. And that these intentional paintings that I was getting psychic hits from, the flight of the Jaguar mission, design these Jaguar Portals, create bodhisattvas where someone can align themselves with transcendent consciousness and the path to get there, creating neural patterns and codings, activating the visual cortex, etc. So here's something that's interesting. We're going to move on, but that morning after I saw the tragedy in front of that building like Red Wolf referred to, I phoned a friend of mine in Malibu who was a psychic I had met at that famous supernatural New Age community site of Damanhur in northern Italy. If you don't know what that is, look up the website, Damanhur, very magical place. But here's the thing, I'm going to stop. We've gone far enough this episode. And this will build and build and build several episodes, and together we're going to decipher what the hell might have happened. But in the next episode or a few beyond, we might discuss a few more paintings after this, but she explains some very haunting, mysterious things that may have been lurking in the night there, and the vulnerability of a blood moon eclipse. So my friends, until next time, remember what you feed yourself visually, orally, through taste, touch, all these things. These can increase anxiety, vulnerability, fear, and subsequent reactions and emotions. Transcendence is blocked. And this realm of dualistic, warring, conflictual consciousness is one gets stuck in it. So take a moment, and which is what these paintings and art were trying to do, is what it would really feel like to unite the hemispheres of the mind, the brain, right brain, left brain, creative, analytical, masculine, feminine, and to transcend the either or, the face-off, and become the both and. And with that, my absurdites, a very serious tra-la-la-la-la. Until next time, bye-bye. And that was it, my dear friends. Teatro Absurdo Series 3, brought to you by Jaguar Bridge Productions, angels, guardians, guides, and perhaps a few demons, if you're lucky, from the underworld. So tune in to us on all the major social circuits around the universe. Bye-bye.